Over the last few weeks, Brandon has written 2 blogs regarding the Greater Toronto Area real estate market. The first blog was about people experiencing financial problems because of pre-construction condos they bought and could not afford to close on, and the condo was resold for a shortfall, and those people are now on the wrong end of a shortfall claim. The second blog was about people in the Greater Toronto Area who could not afford to keep up the payments on the mortgage on their home or investment property, fell into arrears, lost the property, and then were being sued for hundreds of thousands of dollars because the home sold for less than the amount owing on the mortgage. We are also getting many more phone calls from people in that situation wanting to find out about bankruptcy. Well, now this week's Brandon's blog deals with a decision from the Ontario Superior Court of Justice on the discharge from bankruptcy hearing of a person who filed for bankruptcy because of a claim by a home builder when the person could not complete their pre-construction home purchase. The purpose of this blog is to describe the bankruptcy discharge process and talking about the legal reasoning going into why this person could not get an absolute discharge from bankruptcy. My name is Ira Smith, president of Ira Smith, Trustee and Receiver, Inc. Both Brandon Smith and myself are available to answer any questions you may have, either about this Brandon's blog or anything else. So shoot us a message, give us a phone call. We would love to speak with you.
Let's talk about the Greater Toronto Area's real estate market. It's a place where fortunes are made, but they can be lost just as quickly. So what happens when a big real estate deal goes south and bankruptcy seems like the only option? We're about to break down a real Ontario court case that gives us a hard look at the risks of overleveraging and what it really means to get a second chance financially. You know the feeling, right? You see that dream home, you sign on the dotted line, maybe in a pre-construction deal, and you're just full of hope. But what happens if you can't close? How fast can that incredible dream turn into an absolute financial nightmare? We're going to get into exactly that by looking at a very recent court case right here in Ontario. This isn't some textbook theory. It's a real story about a real person, and it has some huge lessons about what the courts expect from you when you file for bankruptcy in Canada. Okay, so when someone files for bankruptcy, the end goal is always something called a discharge. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't get. It's not always a simple wipe the slate clean kind of deal. There are actually a few different ways it can all play out. So what exactly is a bankruptcy discharge? You know, in simple terms, think of it as the finish line. It's the official court order that legally releases you from having to repay most of your debts. It's the final step. So when you get to that finish line, there are 4 possible outcomes. The absolute best case scenario is an absolute discharge. That means you're free and clear, no strings attached. Then there's conditional, which means you have to do something first, usually make some payments. A suspended discharge just means you have to wait a bit longer. And finally, there's refusal, which is super rare, but it means no relief at all. Now keep the conditional one in mind because it is central to the story we're about to get into. Alright, so let's move from the what if to the what happened. We're going to dig into the real-life case of Ms. Sian Glanley, based on a recent decision from the Ontario Superior Court. So back in 2017, Ms. Lee signed a deal to buy a house in Richmond Hill. And look at that price tag, over $1.4 million. Now that's a huge number for sure, but in the GTA market, not completely unheard of. But hold on, because this is the detail that will make your jaw drop. In that same year, her and her husband's total reported income was less than $20,000. The math just doesn't work. I mean, how could anyone expect to get financing for a $1.4 million home on that income? This right here is where the whole thing started to unravel. So here's the play-by-play. She signed the deal in 2017. Then, no surprise, she can't close the deal in 2018. The developer, of course, sues her for damages. We're talking over $280,000. Southwest, just before the court can issue a judgment against her, she files for bankruptcy. And that leads us to the million-dollar question, right? She filed for bankruptcy to get rid of this huge debt. So why didn't she get that clean slate? Why didn't she get the absolute discharge we were just talking about? Well, the court found three major issues based on Canada's bankruptcy laws. First, they said her financial problems were her own fault. Second, they called her actions rash and hazardous speculation. In everyday language, it was a reckless gamble she had no business making. And third, and this is a big one, she didn't cooperate fully with her bankruptcy trustee, which is a huge red flag for any court. And believe me, the court did not mince words. Just read this direct quote. They called her impulsive, naive, and irresponsible. So instead of that fresh start, she got a conditional discharge. The court ordered her to pay over $28,000 to a creditor before she could be released from her debts. Okay, so what's the lesson here for the rest of us? What can we all learn from this story to make sure we don't end up in a similar situation if we ever face serious financial trouble? The takeaways here are crystal clear. First, you have to be brutally realistic about what you can afford. And if you do end up filing for bankruptcy, you have to cooperate 100% with your trustee. It's not a passive process where you just wait. You have a legal duty to help them, and that means you've got to understand what's required of you and keep track of everything. So if you're looking at a mountain of debt and it feels completely overwhelming, what's the right move? It's so important to know that bankruptcy isn't the only option available. Let's compare two of the main options. On one side, you have a consumer proposal, and on the other, bankruptcy. For a lot of people, a consumer proposal is actually a much better fit. It's a formal deal you make with your creditors to pay back a percentage of what you owe over time. And the huge advantages, you get to keep your assets and you avoid having a bankruptcy on your record. It gives you relief, but with fewer of those strict legal duties. So how do you even know if you need to be looking at these options? Well, these are the classic warning signs. If you can't make your mortgage, if the collection calls never stop, if you're using credit cards just to get by, or if you're just plain losing sleep over all this debt, it is absolutely time to talk to a professional. Please, don't wait until it's a full-blown crisis. And honestly, if you take one thing away from all this, let it be this: the first step is not to jump into bankruptcy. The very first step is to sit down and get clear, confidential, expert advice from a licensed insolvency trustee who can show you all your options. And that path to getting advice, it's way simpler than you probably think. It really just starts with you getting your financial info together, and then booking a free, totally confidential consultation with either Brandon Smith or Ira Smith. The whole point is just to see every path that's available, so you can make a smart, informed decision about your own future. The story of Ms. Lee is a powerful reminder that our financial choices, especially in a pressure cooker market like the GTA, have very real consequences. But you know what? It also shows that even when things seem hopeless, there is always a path to recovery. The key is to act early, be honest with yourself, and get the right guidance to find the path that makes sense for you. So call either Brandon or Ira at Ira Smith Trustee and Receiver Incorporated at 647-799-3312 to eliminate your debt, return to a much calmer way of life, starting now.